let the Lancet speak for me. The Lancet is a very, very well respected British medical journal, and they've made quite a scathing diagnosis of what's happening. And they say that a mix of complacency in India combined with insufficient preparation and a slowed start of India's botched vaccination campaign, damning words indeed, has led to this position where half the cases of coronavirus in the whole world are happening in India.
Yeah, shocking statistics, as you say. But when we
It,
spoke, probably about a year ago, India seemed to have somehow managed to sidestep the worst. In fact, the numbers of coronavirus a year ago was much lower than you might expect from a country with 1.23 billion people.
Absolutely. I remember this conversation with you at the outbreak of coronavirus in the UK and the impact in India. And as you say, it was amazingly low. And that was because as soon as things started to look dicey in India here, the Prime Minister Modi, he imposed a national lockdown with only 4 hours' notice, which itself had a devastating effect with loads of what we call daily wage workers, people who were in very insecure employment, having nothing to do because all the houses and businesses were shut down. So there was a mass emigration from cities into rural areas, taking with it the coronavirus that they'd contracted in the cities. And that led to further problems. But Modi thought that he was saving India's economy, but it was very, very short term, and it didn't. And then what happened? There was a short term effect, and coronavirus seemed to be under control. But actually, what happened was that they became very complacent in India. And Modi started to trumpet that India's coronavirus situation is under control, but really he wasn't putting into practice what he was saying, and they weren't making sure that there was enough of an infrastructure in place. And as the Lancet has said, they just became very complacent. And meantime, it's been taking off around the world, not least where you are, Dotun, in the UK, and coming back into India, indeed, various variants which have been mutating with a huge population there. Less than, and the Indian government said, we will vaccinate most of the population by July 2021. And that hasn't happened. In fact, as we speak, less than 3% of the population has been vaccinated. So it's a bit of a sad story all round. And now hospitals are sending SOS messages on social media begging for oxygen. And the news, you see, the news journalists and news outlets are reporting what's actually going on the ground. And there are horrifying reports. In one very, very established news organization, not ours, I saw a video this morning which showed grief-stricken families marching into intensive care wards where the doctors have disappeared because they've been beaten up by relations of dead and dying patients, because the patients have died for a lack of oxygen and a lack of painkillers. Doctors have just been fleeing the whole hospitals in fear of their own lives. So it really, and these grim statistics, Dotton, it's coming out sort of on a daily basis. A 7-day average has just come out of the highest number of cases on record, a 7-day average of the highest number of deaths on record. It's one almost dreads opening the news outlets up to see what we need to report on, because these grim figures keep coming at us. And of course, it affects Indians not only in India, but journalists in India, journalists around the world of Indian origin who have a link to the subcontinent. That I don't think anybody who's been reporting for Five Live of Asian Extraction like me has been left untouched by this. We've all got relations and friends who have been killed or affected by COVID in some way.
I think you make a very good point that the links between our two countries are strong and are umbilical. And the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, has made a point of this in Britain's attempts of trying to do what it can to minimize the impact of the pandemic in India, or at least to provide some medical assistance at the very least. We've all been shocked. I mean, whether you, and I get the point that if you are of um, Indian origin, for want of a better way of describing it, the impact will be felt much more closely to home. But we've all been shocked by this. And there will be a level of psychological um, impact as well, both, and not just amongst journalists, but amongst ordinary people in the UK, as much as there will be that impact, of course, in India as well. I see that Dr. Pushpinder Chowdhury has been speaking about just that, the psychological fallout of COVID-19 on people in India and people of Indian origin here.
Exactly, Dotun. You know, it's something South Asians don't like talking about, mental health. And, you know, they don't even like to utter the word depression. It's foreign to most of them. Whereas in the UK and abroad, mental health is very much to the fore during this crisis. And on Five Live, there have been numerous pieces about mental health, but it's still kind of forbidden in the South Asian community. Now, psychotherapist Dr. Pushpinder Chaudhry, MBE, sits on the board of a mental health charity, and she's been working in this area for over 20 years, and she knows this. She's told me that Asians don't like to even use the word depression. They'll talk about heart sinking or feeling sad or tired instead. And so she's tapped into a way of getting the Asian community in India and abroad, because she studies both countries in the diasporas, to tune into mental health through the media that they do love, which is film or music or dance. And she's created something called the UK Asian Film Festival. It sounds glamorous, but it's not particularly. It actually brings to the fore some very, very hard hitting films which actually do talk about difficult to discuss subjects for South Asians. And especially the psychological aspects. Here's what she told me.
It's really sad to see what's happening in India. My own family in Delhi is severely affected with this virus. My sister-in-law's son is in ICU fighting for his life. His son, 30-year-old, died last week. It is heartbreaking to see so many young people dying. All deaths and infections, I think, are underreported. There is huge shortage of basic medical care, hospital beds, oxygen, even paracetamol. The whole country is in collective grief, which has engulfed us all here as well. We see slow deaths with COVID where they can't breathe. I wonder what effect this would have on collective psyche of people who survive this. There is a lot of anxiety and fear and devastation because of this virus. UK Asian Film Festival will be remembering and reflecting on people who have died and the one who have survived, and to see how we can help to heal. Festival is reaching out to help British Asian Trust with their Oxygen for India emergency appeal.
Yeah, and one can only imagine what people are going through psychologically. You know, I mean, not to make the comparison exactly, but I know even though we may not have a collective sense of grief here in the UK, a national collective sense of grief, those of us who have been directly impacted by COVID will know what Dr. Chowdhury means by the amount of mental stress that you go through at the moment. When we spoke a year ago, though, Rani, about this, what I remember clearly was just a conversation about the long and porous border that India has, first and foremost with Pakistan, I guess, to the west. And beyond Pakistan, of course, Pakistan shares a long and porous border with Iran, which was at that time, a year ago, one of the epicenters of coronavirus. But Pakistan has also been affected by this, but not. It doesn't seem to make the headlines. Why is that?
Yes, you're right, and well remembered, Dotun, because you and I have discussed COVID in South Asia incessantly since then in each of these chats, these regular chats that we do about what's going on in South Asia. And as you rightly remember, COVID came into Pakistan from Iran because Pakistan was very quick about completely sealing its borders off as much as it could and containing the COVID cases up at the borders in military medical camps. And then it did experience a wave, and now it's in a second wave. It is taking some of its cases from India because there's so much going on in India, as you pointed out yourself, Dotun, in the past. It does seep across the porous borders. However, in Pakistan, there are also cases coming in via British Pakistanis, and that's where the problems are arising. Then there have been only sort of sporadic lockdowns in Pakistan. It hasn't been a complete national lockdown. And schools have been intermittently closing and opening. Now, in Pakistan, what they've noticed, and I'll be introducing the South Asia COVID-19 ambassador in a minute, he actually said that Pakistan was not hit as bad as India has been, and he said the experts, the doctors like him, they couldn't actually work it out, and they said that they really couldn't understand that. Of course, there's a high youthful population in Pakistan, but there is in India, but they didn't. But the country wasn't as badly affected then as it is now. Now in Pakistan. Now there has not been as rigorous an observation of what they call standard operating procedures. You know, the things that you're doing in Britain very well, wearing masks and keeping social distancing and washing of hands and so on, and getting vaccinated or getting tested. So the cases are rising. With this British variant that's come in. And then, of course, with the holy month of Ramadan coming to an end, whereas people were at home resting or working outside in the daytime, in the evening when they break their fasts, they do intermingle as a family or whoever's sharing the household. You know, it could be a big joint family. And if some of those joint family members have been outside working, for instance, in the daytime, they could be bringing the coronavirus back into the house. So that's one risky area. And now then Ramadan culminates in the big holy festival of Eid, when everybody dresses up, mixes with each other. And that's going to be another problem. It could be a super spreading event. So between the 8th and 16th of May, Pakistan's government has imposed a partial lockdown. The mosques have stayed open right through Ramadan. As I said, these safety operating procedures are important. There have been Chinese vaccines coming into the country. And I did speak to Salman Ahmed, who's the COVID-19 South Asia ambassador. He's a fully trained doctor, and he's been investigating around the country to see what's going on. And he was the UN Goodwill ambassador. He also happens to be the lead musician with Asia's biggest rock band, Junoon. But he's talking here in his medical capacity as Dr. Salman Ahmed. This is what he told me.
The next 5 to 6 weeks are going to be crucial for Pakistan vis-a-vis COVID-19. Having negotiated the first and second waves fairly well, the third wave has proven to be the greatest challenge. And I think the reasons are because schools were opened up in February, the wedding season got underway and people relaxed with the SOPs. A lot of British Pakistanis were visiting families or attending these weddings. They brought in the Kent strain, the B117 strain. And so the health infrastructure has been heavily burdened. As you might remember, the Prime Minister Imran Khan became COVID positive, as did the President Arif Alvi, as thousands of others. The next 5 to 6, very crucial. The CanCino vaccine, which has had phase 3 trials, which shows 75% efficacy against infection. This will be the way forward for Pakistan.
Yeah, it's some irony, isn't it, Rani, that whilst people there are concerned about the British variant, we're concerned about the Indian variant. Should we be worried?
Indeed, Dotun, because the Indian variant, deadly as it is, has seeped back into the UK. Multiple cases all over the UK now are being found, and this one is able to evade vaccines. It is already mutated. And this is the insidious nature of this terrible disease, that we think we've cornered it with one vaccine, but then if it finds a breeding ground, a big population of unimmunized people, it can get into them. It's like something out of Doctor Who, but much more deadly. It can get into them, and then it can mutate and disguise itself. And go, it's really a danger to the world. So what happens in India, huge country with huge diasporas around the world, does impact the rest of the world, not least of all Britain.
Indeed. But so it's really about governments talking as well, amongst other things, you'd have thought, because the level of COVID infections in the subcontinent is of concern on a national level to Britain and many other countries as well. Do you know what's going on between the heads of states, the conversations they're having? Because, of course, Boris Johnson has had some high-level talks with the Indian Prime Minister, I believe.
He has. Boris Johnson has had some high-level talks with the Indian Prime Minister. And, of course, there are the usual noises about Britain pledges to do what it can. Having said that, some of the aid was held up and only recently arrived in India, the ventilators and the oxygen tanks and so on. And actually, at the moment, because of Brexit, one gets the impression that Boris Johnson is much more interested in trade deals with India than anything else. I've said before on this show that India is an important market, that all the countries, the US and the UK, are keen to corner. So they've got their eye on that money prize more than anything else. Of course, diplomatic talks are going on as far as the health situation is concerned, but you also have to have a government that itself cares about the little man, as we call the common man in India, that makes up the bulk of the population. And I've drawn comparisons between Modi and Trump in the past, and Modi has risen to a hugely powerful position. There are few leaders who command his level of popularity, even in these times, and he's keen to hold on to that. And and such is his sort of oblivion to what is going on at street level, to announce that he's going to have a huge revamp of the prime ministerial residence within 12 months, and the whole parliamentary complex, when you've got so many Indians dying on the streets, so many that there isn't enough space in cremation grounds and burial grounds for them. They're just in body bags thrown on the street, some of them. It does seem as though there is a little bit of out of stepness with what is going on. And he likes image, he's a showman, and he thinks that people will buy his words. Having said that, his image has taken a bit of a dent.
I know that one early casualty of the pandemic crisis in India was the Indian Premier League. There were arguments, I know, from the promoters that the IPL, the world's richest cricket tournament, was actually needed as a way of, a good news messenger for India at a time of crisis. But even that has now had to be suspended, if not permanently abandoned. We'll find out later on, of course, whether that will be the case.
Correct, Dotun, correct. And of course, Indian cricketers are heroes to cricket fans everywhere, but particularly Indians. You know, it's got a higher place than religion. People will take a bath and watch the cricket matches much more readily than they will go to temple very often. And these guys are heroes. And the IPL, the Indian Premier League, is a huge money spinner, let's not forget. So they determinedly went ahead with it, not least because of the money angle, despite the soaring number of cases in India, COVID cases. And they created what they said was a very secure bio bubble for the players, for the backup staff and everything, with rigorous standards. But then 1, 2, 3, 4 teams have been infiltrated with the coronavirus, and so they've had to abandon. The chairman of the BCCI has had to, Sourav Ganguly has had to suspend the IPL for now. I mean, yes, cricket is a great diversion for Indians, but I'd like to throw in a little point here that the person who actually runs the IPL happens to be the son of the Home Minister, Amit Shah, in India. So I wonder if it was, he had his eye on the sort of the money angle, shall we say. But there is one player, India's former captain, MS Mahendra Singh Dhoni, who was playing in the IPL before it got suspended. And he's a real hero for Indians and for cricket fans around the world. You know, he captained India for 10 years, wearing the number 7 jersey. And he, as I'm sure you'll agree, has a reputation for keeping his cool under pressure and leading India to win 27 tests as captain. And he is hailed as a cricket hero. Now, as cricketers think about what will happen when they finish playing cricket, he's had his eye on a few ideas. And there could be, just like you've had in Britain, you've had some really good news stories through the pandemic, like Captain Sir Tom Moore and other sort of cheering news items. There's one that might give cheer to some Indians at this horrible time of pandemic, and that is that MS Dhoni is going to emerge leading India's first spy hero animation series on one of the streaming giants, BBC Mr. Trick there. And it's going to be called Captain 7, after the number 7 jersey he was wearing. And it's going to be looking at his attributes, and he's going to be deploying these in this animation series. And there's going to be one every year. Now, I wanted to know, what is it about MS Dhoni that Indians coalesce around, and why do they treat him as a hero? And I was lucky enough to find solicitor Ninesh Desai, who's a solicitor by day but passionate about cricket. He's the director of Durham County Cricket Club, and he represents many distinguished cricketers from around the world, including Lord Botham, your own Lord Botham. And if you go and visit his plush offices, Ninesh's plush offices in Mayfair, in the boardroom you'll see expensive items from charity auctions to do with cricket, like signed cricket bats and cartoons and things like that. He's a great collector and a great fan. And I asked him to sum up for the listeners why MS Dhoni is so important for India.
Let me make a confession first of all. I am a die-hard MS Dhoni fan, and let me tell you why I think MS is so important to India. I've been lucky enough to meet him and observe him at close quarters. He is Captain Cool, calm, measured, assured, and dignified off the field just as much as he is on the field. And MS is revered not only because he's a swashbuckling cricketer who led India to a World Cup victory with a spine-tingling 6, or leading them to the number 1 position in Test cricket and one-day cricket. MS is revered because he represents the new India. A boy from a humble background, from a small town where cricket is not a big sport, becomes the nation's hero. His success signifies the dream of billions. Whatever your background, you can scale the heights. This is the message for all aspirational Indians. He is important because he proves in India today dreams can come true.